Hey World History, welcome to your first and very first ever video lesson of World History. I definitely miss being with you guys. I was really glad that I got to talk to most of you yesterday. If you missed my call or if I didn't get a hold of you, don't worry, I'm going to try again today. But yeah, like I said, I missed you guys, but I hope that through the videos and through some of the chats that we'll be able to have, I hope that it doesn't seem like too long until we're all back in the classroom again. Today we are talking about chapter 14, which is the beginnings of our global age, specifically focusing on Europe, Africa, and Asia. We are going to start with section 1, and today's video is all about section 1, which is called The Search for Spices. After you watch this video, you will have all the information that you need to complete your assigned Juno pod for today. Alternatively, if you are more of a visual learner and don't like listening to videos or watching it, you can get all of this information from your book. Again, we are in chapter 14, section 1, and this is on pages 446 through page 451. I'll write that up here just in case. So page 446 through 451. If you would like to supplement this by reading out of your book. But if you don't have your book yet, then that's okay. All the information that you need is in this video. So, the search for spices. Throughout history, groups of people from the Greeks to the Arabs to the Vikings had explored the seas, and there's trading and there's migrating over long distances. But the European Renaissance and the sailors of the 1400s began a completely new period of exploration. Why? Well, Europeans traded with Asians long before the Renaissance. This establishment of the trade link between Europe and Asia is not new. The spice road has been going on for decades, for centuries even. However, the Crusades introduced a lot of Europeans to the luxury goods from the Middle East and from Asia that were carried through the Mongol Empire, because remember, the Mongol Empire stretched all the way from Asia to Europe. And so, because you were only traveling through one empire, it was a lot easier to trade from, say, China to Italy, because you really only had to get through the Mongol stuff. And so, if the Mongols were the ones doing the trading, then it was a lot easier to access these goods. Now, what disrupted the trade? What disrupts all trade? I can hear you all thinking it. The Black Death, the plague. When lots of people die, nobody really wants to go traveling. Kind of like how we're not allowed to go anywhere right now because we're worried about getting sick. Now, they didn't understand germ theory back then, so they didn't necessarily understand that lots of people could pass it, but they did get the hang of, okay, if I go hang out with somebody who has the Black Death, I'm probably also going to get the Black Death. And so when a whole bunch of people were sick and dying, just like now, people didn't want to travel. But as the Black Death no longer kills a third of Europe's population, as they survive that, and by the 1400s, you have a growing European population. And the most valued items were spices, which were used to preserve food, to flavor the meat, and to make medicines and perfumes. Okay, so spices were super useful, not only as preservatives, but also to season things, obviously, and for medicines. So again, spices are going to be really important. And the chief source of spices was an island chain in Indonesia called the Moluccas, but the Europeans just called it the Spice Islands. Okay, so your source was the Molucca Islands, which is part of Indonesia. And I'll zoom in on the whiteboard from time to time so that you can see what I'm writing. Okay, so in the 1400s, Arab and Italian merchants controlled most of the trade between Asia and Europe. Okay, so 1400s was controlled by Arabs due to the prominence and the prosperity of the Middle East, and Italians. So they controlled the trade. They controlled the trade between Asia and Europe. Muslim traders brought prized goods to Eastern Mediterranean markets, and then Italian traders carried them to the rest of the Europeans. So the Arab traders would get everything from Asia, bring it to Italy, Greece, and then the Italians would take it from Italy and Greece to Spain, Germany, everywhere else that you wanted to go. Although remember, Germany was the Holy Roman Empire. They were also driven by Renaissance curiosity to seek new lands. We learned about Marco Polo and how influential he was when he got back from Asia and published his book about how rich and wonderful and opulent Asia was. Now, who leads the charge? Well, in Europe, there's a lot of internal difficulty going on, but the most stable and rich country in Europe, other than Italy at the time, was Portugal. Yes, Portugal led the way, and it was led by a guy named Prince Henry. So, Prince Henry was also known as Henry the Navigator because he was such a big fan of exploration. Prince Henry, he also spent a lot of money to train navigators to go out and take the world. So first, Prince Henry's navigators discovered and claimed the Madeira and the Azores Islands in the west and southwest of Portugal. By 1415, Portugal has expanded into Muslim North Africa, seizing some of the coastline. So Portugal is expanding and really taking control of different ports, of different islands, in order to further their own trade. They also wanted to start mapping Africa. Prince Henry was very big into Africa. He thought that a lot of wealth and riches could be gained from there. He also wanted to convert the Africans to Christianity because Portugal was a Christian nation. And they saw that the Africans were either Islamic or they practiced like a pagan tribal religion. And so he was really focused on converting them, in addition to, of course, getting the riches of the Muslim traders, because the Arab traders looked so rich, so wealthy to the Europeans that they wanted what they had, and Prince Henry thought that what they had came from Africa. Okay, so Prince Henry wanted Africa for two reasons: conversion to Christianity, and also wealth and riches. Because remember, to the Europeans, most of the Arab trade comes from Africa. You remember Mansa Musa, the billionaire from Africa. So the Portuguese felt that with their expert knowledge and technology, they could accomplish the feat of actually getting to Asia by going around Africa. They didn't quite realize how big Africa was when they made this plan, but Prince Henry thought that it would work. He gathered scientists, he gathered cartographers. So a cartographer makes maps. As you might imagine, this wasn't super useful for a long time, but now that we're trying to explore the world, cartographers now can make bank. They redesign ships, they prepare maps, they train captains and crews for long voyages, because now they're trying to go around Africa. And Henry dies in 1460, but his spirit lives on, and the Portuguese continue their quest. In 1488, a man named Bartholomew Dias rounded the southern tip of Africa. Despite the turbulent seas, he named it the Cape of Good Hope because he was hopeful that this would lead them to Asia. But they want to go to India. And so in 1497, a guy named Vasco da Gama follows in Dias's footsteps, rounds the Cape of Good Hope, but da Gama goes further. He actually makes it all the way to the spice port of Calicut on the western coast of India. So over 10 months, he made it all the way to India. He was the first explorer to do so by going around the tip of Africa. Despite the hard journey, on the way back from India, they lost half their ships, and many sailors died of hunger, thirst, and scurvy, which was a disease caused by a lack of vitamin C. Despite the hard journey, though, the venture proved highly profitable. Da Gama acquired cargo of spices that he sold at an enormous profit. So he was able to buy the spices in India very cheaply, and then when he got back to Europe, he sold them for more expensive than he bought them, so he made bank. And so obviously Portugal wants to keep doing it. And so da Gama's voyages confirm Portugal's status as a world power in this time. But not everybody thinks that this is the best way to do it. News of Portugal's successes spreads throughout Europe, and other nations want part of the wealth as well, and other people want part of the wealth. And one of them is an Italian merchant named Christopher Columbus. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Columbus. So Columbus is Italian, but he does not sail for Italy. He wants to reach the East Indies, which are in Southeast Asia, and he wants to do it by sailing west. And that's the weird part about Columbus, is Columbus doesn't want to go around the tip of Africa, which we know already exists. He wants to go west, which nobody has done before. He is convinced that North America and South America do not exist, and that if you sail west from Europe, you are going to sail through the Atlantic, and the next thing you're going to hit is Japan. Okay? So he's convinced that those continents aren't there because no one's ever seen them and come back to Europe to tell them about it. Okay? He does believe the world is round. He does not believe that he's going to fall off the edge. Okay? So, like most educated Europeans, he knows the earth is round. But Portugal refuses to sponsor him. Portugal says, we already have enough money with people like Da Gama going to India around Africa. Why would we pay money to send you to go a way that you all might die? And so Columbus keeps asking, and he persuades Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, the king and queen, to finance his voyage. To increase their authority, the Spanish rulers, these are the same ones who are perpetuating the Inquisition, and so they're the ones who are bringing you under trial if you're not Catholic, especially the Jews. Ferdinand and Isabella have worked on kicking all the Jews out of Spain, but the issue was the Jews were a lot of Spain's most cultured and affluent people, and so it's weakening the nation. So despite the fact that Ferdinand and Isabella are trying to make Spain 100% Christian, they're actually weakening their nation by lowering the diversity. And they realize this, and they want to bring their nation back into prominence. So they sponsor Columbus. On August 3rd, 1492, Columbus sails west. He's got 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And although the expedition encountered good weather and favorable wind, they kept sailing, and kept sailing, and kept sailing, and didn't make landfall when they thought that they were supposed to. Provisions ran low. The crew became anxious, and it wasn't till October 12th, some months later, that land was spotted. Now, Columbus thought that he had reached India. Remember, he doesn't think North and South America exist. And so he's convinced that he's in India, which is why he calls the people there Indians, which is why we call Native Americans Indians. It's a complete mistake, which is why, as much as possible, you hear me say Native Americans instead of Indians, because Indians are only called Indians because Columbus messed up. And so they are Native Americans. They are not Indians. But Columbus didn't know that. He thought he'd reached India. And so he gets there, and it takes a while for somebody to realize that he didn't actually reach India, but eventually they figure it out. The guy's name is Amerigo Vespucci. He writes it on a map. That's why it's called America. So they figure this out, and he returns to Spain to a hero's welcome. Now, he becomes a jerk later on in life, so don't take that too seriously. But Spain realizes how much wealth they can get, and immediately Portugal wants in. So in 1493, Ferdinand and Isabella go to the Pope, and they say, hey, we want claim to the New World. Okay? So Columbus has made it to the New World. Italian, he sails for Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. And then Spain wants a claim to the New World. And so they go to the Pope, and they say, hey, we want claim. And so the Pope creates this thing called the line of demarcation. And the line of demarcation is exactly what you think it is. It's a line. And the line of demarcation divides the non-European world into 2 zones. And this is done by the Pope. Spain has trading and exploration to any lands west of the line, and Portugal has rights to any lines east, which is how Portugal ends up with Brazil, because this line cuts right through Brazil. It's why the rest of South America is predominantly Spanish, but the line cuts right through Brazil, which is why Brazilians speak Portuguese. Shout out to all of my Portuguese in the class, or all of my Brazilians in the class. There's your heritage. The specific terms of the line of demarcation were agreed to in what's called the Treaty of Tordesillas, not the Treaty of Tortillas, the Treaty of Tordesillas. And so this is agreed to by Spain and Portugal, and it divides the world. Now, to name it, Amerigo Vespucci, like I said, he writes a journal describing it, and people call it the Americas. Now, the very last thing we'll talk about today is the search for direct route. People realize now that North and South America are in the way. And so they're wondering, what the heck is the easiest way to get to Asia? We're all dying no matter which way we go. And so now the English, the Dutch, and the French are getting on board with this. And it's not till 1519 when a Portuguese nobleman named Ferdinand Magellan, okay? Ferdinand Magellan decides that he wants to try his hand at this, and he wants to go all the way to reach the Pacific by going the way of the Atlantic. Magellan and his men entered a bay. They went all the way around the bottom tip of South America, kept going across the Pacific, made it to the Philippines, and this is actually where it's called the Pacific. It wasn't called the Pacific until Magellan named it, because when he made it through brutal storms, tides, unpredictable winds, and he emerged into the South Sea, the sea was so much calmer than he was used to that he named it the Pacific, which means peaceful. Their mission accomplished, most of the crew wanted to go back the way they came, but Magellan wanted to keep going. So remember, they've now gone from Europe down around the coast of South America and into the Philippines. Magellan, though, underestimates the size of the Pacific. He thought that 3 weeks of sailing through the Pacific would get them to Asia, but it doesn't. If you've ever seen it on a map, the Pacific is massive. For nearly 4 months, remember, Magellan thought it was going to be 3 weeks. 4 months, they go through the uncharted ocean. And it's not until March they reach the Philippines, okay? And Magellan is actually killed in the Philippines. He doesn't make it. And it's not until 3 years after setting out, the survivors, which are only 18 sailors, make it to Spain. Okay? And so 3 years later, 18 of the original crew made it back to where they started. But Magellan was the first person to lead a voyage that ends up doing what's called circumnavigating. Circum meaning to circle, navigate meaning to go. So circumnavigate means go around the world. Okay? So Magellan, remember, he dies in the Philippines, but his crew are the very first ones to circumnavigate. Okay? So that should give you most of what you need to be able to complete your Junipod. Again, if you want to supplement any of this information, it does come out of section 1, which is pages 445 to 451 of your book. I hope that this works. Please feel free to give me feedback. Say, hey, Miss Sullivan, it's hard to read your whiteboard. Or, hey, Miss Sullivan, this part went a little bit too fast. But I will zoom in on my whiteboard one more time so you can kind of look at it a little bit. Those are our notes for today. And good luck. Like I said, this is all going to get more refined over the next couple weeks as we figure this out together. But good luck. You can do it. Feel free to contact me with any questions you might have. Bye, guys. Have a great day.